My best friend whispered, "She can't even afford rent," thinking I wouldn't hear. But when I walked to the landlord's office, signed a paper, and announced, "I just bought this building," she looked like she'd seen a ghost as I slid a notice across her table. I never thought I'd hear my best friend talk about me like that. The words still echo in my mind, sharp and cold, like the wind cutting through Chicago's early spring air. She can't even afford rent. It was a whisper, barely audible, but I heard every syllable as if she had shouted it. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. I should start from the beginning. My name is Rebecca Carter, and for the past 6 months, I've been picking up the broken pieces of my life, one painful shard at a time. Before this, I lived what most would call a comfortable life, married, financially stable, a nice house in Lincoln Park, and a circle of friends I trusted. But then my husband, Travis, decided that our 10 years together weren't worth as much as the attention of a 24-year-old yoga instructor. The divorce was ugly. I won't bore you with the legal battles, the gut-wrenching conversations, or the slow realization that the man I had loved for over a decade had been slipping away long before I noticed. What I will say is that Travis was smart conniving, really. He hid assets, played the system, and made sure that by the time the ink on the divorce papers dried, I was left with almost nothing. My lawyer did her best, but I walked away with barely enough to start over. No house, no security, just a small settlement, a handful of untouched investments, and a nagging sense of betrayal that sat in my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. So, I did what I had to. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a building that had seen better days. The paint on the walls was peeling, the floors creaked with every step, and the plumbing had a personality of its own. But it was home for now, and it was close to Alyssa Moore. Alyssa had been my best friend since college. We met as freshmen at Northwestern University, bonding over bad cafeteria food and an intense hatred for our statistics professor. She was the type of friend who never let you forget that she had her life together: perfect apartment, high-paying job in corporate marketing, and effortlessly put-together wardrobe. But I didn't mind. Alyssa had always been bold, confident, and tally honest. At least, I thought she was honest. I don't even know why I went to her apartment that night. Maybe I was craving normalcy. Maybe I wanted to feel like I still had something left from my old life. I had just picked up a bottle of Malbec, planning to surprise her. We used to have wine nights every week, back when my world hadn't fallen apart. But as I reached her door, I heard voices inside. I almost knocked, but then I heard my name. "She can't even afford rent." Alyssa's voice was clear, edged with amusement, as if she were commenting on a bad reality TV show. Bethany, her co-worker, laughed. "Are you serious?" "I mean, it's pathetic," Alyssa said. "She went from living in a house with 4 bedrooms to struggling to pay for this." There was a pause. I felt my throat tighten, my fingers gripping the bottle a little too hard. "Didn't she get anything in the divorce?" Bethany asked. "Not much," Alyssa replied, her voice dripping with something I couldn't quite place. "And, I get it, I really do. But I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending. She's just so desperate." I stood there, frozen. Desperate. I had known heartbreak. I had known betrayal. But this felt like a KNFA between my ribs. Alyssa was my best friend. She had watched me cry through my divorce, listened to me pour my soul out over coffee, and held my hand through nights where I didn't know how I was going to wake up and face the next day. And the whole time, this was what she really thought of me? I should have stormed in. I should have confronted her, screamed, asked her why. But I didn't. Instead, I turned around, walked back to my apartment, and sat in silence for what felt like hours. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad. I just felt empty. And then, I felt something else. A slow, simmering anger. The days that followed were strange. I didn't tell Alyssa I had hurt her. I still responded to her texts, still met her for coffee when she asked. But something had shifted. I was no longer her friend. I was an observer. And when I started watching, I started noticing. Alyssa had always made little digs at me, comments that I used to laugh off, but now they cut in a way they never had before. "Are you really still wearing that coat? God, Becca, you've had that since we were 25. You know, you could try online dating again. I mean, sure, it's harder for women in their mid-30s, but you never know. You're so lucky you don't have kids. Imagine going through a divorce with kids." Yikes. I had excused it for years, chalking it up to her blunt nature. But now I knew the truth. Alyssa had never seen me as her equal. She had seen me as a project, a comparison point, someone she could always look at and think, well, at least I'm doing better than Rebecca. I had let her, but I wasn't going to anymore. The opportunity came out of nowhere. I was browsing real estate listings for a client when I saw it. A listing for my building. I stared at it for a full minute, my heart pounding. Mr. Wilkes, the landlord, was selling. And the price? It was within my reach. Barely. It would take everything I had left: my savings, my emergency fund, even an old investment account Travis hadn't managed to touch. But if I played it right, I could do it. I could buy the building. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I called my broker the next morning. The process took weeks. Weeks of contracts, financing, and late nights running numbers. Alyssa had no idea. She still texted me, still invited me to brunch, still lived in blissful ignorance. Then, one afternoon, I signed the final papers. I walked out of the office with a new title: Landlord. owner of the building Alyssa had mocked. And the next morning, I walked straight to her apartment with a piece of paper in my hand. Alyssa was lounging on her couch when she opened the door, a lazy smile on her face. Becca, what's up? I didn't speak. I just reached into my bag and pulled out the new rental agreement. She frowned, flipping through the pages. What is this? I met her eyes. It's your new lease, I said, my voice calm. With increased rent. Effective immediately. Alyssa's face went pale. Wait, what? I smiled, slow and deliberate. I own this building now. Her breath hitched. She looked at me, then at the paper in her hands, then back at me. For the first time in 15 years, Alyssa had nothing to say. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could see the wheels turning in Alyssa's head, her manicured fingers gripping the paper a little too tightly. She blinked, once, twice, as if trying to process what she had just heard. You what? She finally stammered, her voice unsteady. I folded my arms, letting the weight of my words sink in. I own the building now, I repeated, enunciating each word carefully, savoring the way her face twisted in disbelief. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. This has to be a joke. It's not. I watched as she scanned the lease again, flipping through the pages, her expression shifting from confusion to something dangerously close to panic. Alyssa was many things, but she wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what this meant. You can't just, she started, but then stopped herself. She lifted her eyes to mine, searching for something, some sign that I was bluffing. But I wasn't. She exhaled sharply and tossed the lease onto her coffee table. Why would you do this? I tilted my head. Why wouldn't I? Alyssa scoffed. Becca, come on. This isn't you. You don't just, she gestured wildly at the papers, do things like this. That's where she was wrong. I hadn't been that person before, but I sure as HLL was now. She pressed her lips together, her usual confidence flickering. Is this about what I said? That night. Oh, there it was. She knew. I let the silence hang. Alyssa shifted in her seat, arms crossed tightly over her chest. I didn't mean it like that, she said, her tone softer now, careful. You know I was just venting. Venting? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. She nodded quickly. Bethany was being a BTCH, and I was just, I don't know, talking. You know how it is. I didn't mean any of it. I let out a breath through my nose, shaking my head slightly. You call me desperate. Alyssa's jaw clenched. It was just words. Becca, you're seriously doing this over some dumb comment? Something dark and bitter curled inside me. No, Alyssa, I said slowly. I'm doing this because for the first time in years, I'm seeing things clearly. She opened her mouth, probably to argue, but I wasn't done. I've spent 15 years making excuses for you, laughing off your comments, letting you get away with the little jabs, the backhanded compliments, the constant reminders that you think you're better than me. Alyssa flinched, just slightly. I took a slow step toward her. But here's the thing, you're not better than me. Her face twisted in something between anger and disbelief. Oh, please, she snapped. You're acting like I'm some villain, like I planned all of this. Newsflash, Becca, you were desperate. You lost everything, and you were barely hanging on. What was I supposed to do? Lie? Pretend I didn't see it? I stared at her. There it was. The real Alyssa. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't remorseful. She was angry that I had turned the tables on her. I nodded slowly, letting her words settle. Well, I said evenly, you're about to find out what desperate really feels like. Alyssa's breath hitched. For the first time since I had walked in, real fear flickered in her eyes. And God, it felt good. She swallowed hard, dropping the bravado. Becca, she said, her voice shifting to something softer, something almost pleading. You don't have to do this. We've been friends for so long. Can't we just know? I interrupted. Alyssa blinked, as if she hadn't expected me to shut her down so quickly. I reached into my bag and pulled out another envelope, setting it on top of the lease. What's this? She asked hesitantly. I met her gaze. Your 30-day notice. Her face drained of color. And for the first time in her life, Alyssa had nothing to say. Alyssa didn't move. She just sat there, staring at the envelope as if it might catch fire and burn away the reality she was now facing. I could see the rapid rise and fall of her chest, the tension in her jaw as she processed what was happening. Then, slowly, she lifted her eyes to mine. You're actually kicking me out? Her voice was quieter now, the sharp edges softened by something close to disbelief. I leaned back slightly, folding my arms. I'm following standard rental procedures. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but what could she say? She knew how this worked. 30 days. That was more than fair. You can't be serious. She let out a dry, humorless laugh, shaking her head. Over a stupid comment? Over some dumb SHD I said when I didn't even know you were there? I tilted my head. I don't owe you an explanation. Alyssa's nostrils flared. You're being petty. Maybe. I shrugged. But it's my property now. My rules. She let out a frustrated breath, pushing herself off the couch. She started, pointing a finger at me before stopping herself. She exhaled sharply, squeezing her eyes shut for a second before looking at me again. You're not actually like this, Becca. I lifted an eyebrow. Alyssa, you don't know me as well as you think you do. For years, I had let her dictate the dynamic of our friendship. I had laughed off her insults, swallowed the sting of her words, convinced myself that was just who she was. But now, I could see the way she was scrambling, trying to regain control, trying to fix the narrative. But this wasn't her story anymore. Alyssa let out a bitter scoff. You really think you're on some kind of power trip, don't you? I stared at her, unblinking. You're so smug right now, she continued, her voice rising. Like you finally got one over on me. But let's be real, Becca. This doesn't change anything. You'll always be the woman whose husband left her for someone younger. You'll always be the girl who got left behind. There it was. The real Alyssa. It wasn't just condescension anymore. It was spite. It was rage. She couldn't stand that I had pulled myself up and found a way to rise above her. And she wanted to break me with those words. She wanted me to crumble, to let the wounds of my divorce bleed open again. But it didn't work. Because I wasn't that woman anymore. I stepped forward, closing the space between us just enough that she had to look up at me. You're right, I said, my voice even. Travis did leave me. And for a long time, that defined me. But not anymore. Alyssa clenched her jaw, but I wasn't done. I lost everything. And I rebuilt myself. I continued. I learned what it's like to start over from nothing. And you? I let my gaze flicker over her, taking in the way her fingers twitched at her sides. You wouldn't last a day in my shoes. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, but she said nothing. I took a step back, exhaling slowly. You have 30 days, I said, nodding toward the envelope on the table. I suggest you use them wisely. Alyssa stared at me, her face unreadable. Then, without another word, she snatched the envelope off the table, turned on her heel, and stormed toward her bedroom. I didn't follow. I had said what I needed to say, and for the first time in my life, I walked away from Alyssa Moore without looking back. The door to Alyssa's bedroom slammed shut behind her, the sound reverberating through the apartment. I stood there for a moment, staring at the space she had just occupied, listening to the muffled sound of drawers slamming and fabric rustling. She was probably pacing, furious, trying to figure out her next move. I didn't care. I turned and left, shutting her door behind me with far more control than she had. As I stepped into the hallway, a strange calm settled over me. For years, I had walked away from arguments with Alyssa feeling small, doubting myself, replaying every word in my head, wondering if I had overreacted. But this time, I walked away tall. I had spent months feeling powerless, first in my marriage, then in my divorce, and even in my so-called friendships. But standing up for myself, taking control for the first time in years, had ignited something inside me. And I wasn't about to let it burn out. I should have known Alyssa wouldn't take this lying down. By the time I made it back to my own apartment, my phone was already vibrating nonstop. Texts, calls, voicemails. I ignored them all. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the city move below me. For the first time in months, I actually enjoyed the silence. But Alyssa? She wasn't built for silence. By the next morning, she had escalated. I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Samantha Lynn, another friend from college. Hey, Alyssa just texted me. She said you're evicting her? I exhaled through my nose. Of course she was running to mutual friends, spinning the story in her favor. I picked up my phone. She has 30 days, Sam. Just like anyone else would if their lease wasn't renewed. A few seconds later, 3 dots appeared. She said it's because you're mad at her over some dumb joke? I shook my head. Alyssa was so predictable. It's because she's toxic, Sam. And I'm done making space for people who don't respect me. There was a long pause before Sam responded. Damn, that bad. That bad. A moment later, another message popped up. I get it. Honestly, I've always thought Alyssa was kind of awful to you. Good for you, Becca. I let out a slow breath. I hadn't expected anyone to take my side. Alyssa had always been the social one, the one with the bigger personality, the one who could talk her way out of anything. But maybe, just maybe, people had been seeing the cracks in her facade long before I did. For a while, it seemed like Alyssa had backed down. She stopped calling. She stopped texting. I started to believe she had accepted her fate. I should have known better. Because exactly 10 days later, I walked out of my building to find a moving truck parked outside. And Alyssa? She was standing next to it, arms folded, waiting for me. Wow, I said, stopping in my tracks. You're actually leaving early? She scoffed. Yeah, well, I don't exactly feel welcome here anymore. I glanced at the movers, who were already carrying out furniture. Guess you found a new place fast. Her lips curled into a smirk. Unlike you, Becca, I have options. There she was. The old Alyssa. Still trying to get the last word, still trying to prove something. I should have ignored her. I should have just walked away. But something inside me snapped. I took a slow step toward her. You know what's funny, Alyssa? I said, keeping my voice light. For years, you acted like you were doing me a favor by being my friend. Like I was some project you could fix or look down on. Her smirk faltered. But the truth is, I continued, you needed me a HLL of a lot more than I ever needed you. Alyssa's throat bobbed as she swallowed. That's not true. I tilted my head. Isn't it? She blinked rapidly, like she was trying to figure out how to respond. But for the first time in years, she didn't have a comeback. Instead, she turned away, stepping toward the moving truck. And just like that, she was gone. But the best part? I didn't feel a single ounce of regret. The day Alyssa moved out, I expected to feel something: relief, closure, maybe even a hint of sadness for the friendship we'd once had. But as I watched the moving truck pull away, all I felt was peace. No weight in my chest. No lingering resentment. Just peace. I turned on my heel and walked back inside, feeling lighter than I had in years. Alyssa had been a fixture in my life for so long, a toxic presence I had somehow convinced myself I needed. But now, she was just someone I used to know. Predictably, Alyssa didn't go quietly into the night. Over the next few weeks, I heard whispers mutual friends telling me she had been bad-mouthing me to anyone who would listen. She's gone crazy with power. She's obsessed with holding a grudge. She's not even a real landlord. She just got lucky. I let it all roll off my back. Because while Alyssa was busy running her mouth, I was busy leveling up. I didn't just own one building anymore. 2 months after Alyssa left, I used the rental income from my building and a strategic investment to purchase a second property, a fixer-upper in need of some love. And once I got that up and running, I bought a third. What Alyssa never realized was that by underestimating me, she had set me free. For years, I had measured my worth by my friendships, my marriage, the way people perceived me. I had let people like Alyssa walk all over me because I was so desperate to be liked. But not anymore. I was building something for myself now. And nothing, not Alyssa, not Travis, not my past mistakes was going to take that away from me. It was about a year later when I ran into Alyssa again. I was sitting outside a coffee shop in downtown Chicago, sipping on an oat milk latte, scrolling through my emails, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. I looked up, and there she was. Alyssa. She hadn't changed much, still impeccably dressed, still carrying herself like she was the most important person in the room. But there was something different about her. A tightness around her mouth. A forced brightness in her eyes. And then I saw why. She was wearing a name tag. Alyssa Moore, leasing consultant. I almost laughed out loud. She had spent years mocking me, looking down on my struggles, calling me desperate, and now she was working for a real estate firm. Alyssa followed my gaze and shifted uncomfortably. "Oh," she said, forcing a chuckle. "Yeah, new job." I took a slow sip of my latte. "Leasing consultant," I mused. "So, you work for a property owner now?" Her jaw tightened. "Yeah, well, not everyone can just buy a building out of nowhere." I smiled, setting my cup down. "I didn't buy it out of nowhere," I said simply. "I planned. I worked. I made it happen." Alyssa said nothing. And for the first time, I saw it. She regretted everything. She regretted underestimating me. She regretted throwing our friendship away. She regretted not seeing me for who I really was. And now, she was beneath me professionally, financially, and, most importantly, in the way that truly mattered. She needed me to validate her, to pretend we were still equals. But we weren't. We never would be again. I picked up my phone, checked the time, and smiled politely. "Well, good seeing you, Alyssa," I said as I stood. "Hope your new job works out." She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, maybe apologize, maybe make some snide remark to save face, but in the end, she just nodded stiffly. And as I walked away, head high, shoulders back, and more confident than ever, I knew I had won. Revenge isn't always about cruelty. It's not about burning bridges or seeking destruction. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply proving them wrong. And as I walked toward my next business meeting, another property deal in the works, another step toward the life I had built from nothing, I realized I didn't need to destroy Alyssa. She had already done that to herself. And that was more satisfying than anything I could have ever planned.